Don't forget to celebrate. Remember to celebrate. Celebrate life, celebrate who you are, celebrate your family and your friends. Find ways and places to celebrate because celebration is part of what opens us up to that bigger picture. And celebrations can sometimes get forgotten, especially in these days where things feel like they're more of a struggle.
Respond to every call that excites your spirit. Rumi Jalaluddin. Hello boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, this is Nishant and welcome to the Nishant Garg Show. This is a podcast about helping you live a fulfilled life, and my job on the show is to sit with the world-class experts to extract the practices, routines and habits to help you live a fulfilled and abundant life. Today's guest is Laurie Seymour. Laurie is a 2-time #1 best-selling author, host of the Wisdom Talk Radio podcast, heard in over 59 countries, executive innovation coach, international speaker and trainer, and founder CEO of the Baker Institute. 20 years ago, she was honored to receive the stewardship of a special esoteric technology that accelerates the process of innovation and creation in individuals and groups. After twice living successful careers, first as a psychotherapist and trainer, and then as a solutions engineer in the telecom industry, Laurie founded the Baker Institute to share this creative intelligence technology, the potentiation process. Laurie teaches online and around the world. She writes for the Huffington Post, Aspire magazine, Positively Positive, and other media outlets. She has also been featured in abc.com, foxnews.com, and many others. In this episode, Laurie talks about how to acknowledge our emotions and others, how to focus on the next step in life, realizing your self-worth, to be creative, innovative, and much, much more. Please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Laurie. Laurie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nishant. I really am excited to be with you today.
It is my complete pleasure. I was thinking if we could start with, how would your family describe what you do for a living?
It seems to evolve over time, and it depends on who I'm speaking to, what I actually say. Well, what I would say first is, how smart people around the world are really waking up to the import of what quantum physics has been showing us, that unseen forces of energy really do affect reality directly, including our minds, including our bodies, far more than we realize. And that some people with that choose to go into a kind of a mystical mindset and exploration, but others of us who are more perhaps intellectually oriented and maybe even overeducated prefer to keep logic involved with our esoteric wisdom so that we can enjoy and track measurable results. And those are the people that I work with. Really way over 20 years ago now. I was going to say 20 years ago, but it's longer than that. I was honored to receive the stewardship of a special esoteric technology that accelerates the process of innovation and creation in individuals and groups. And that's the work that I'm doing now around the world, because not only because we're virtual now, but because I've been doing that way most of the time. And I see that my work is really valuable for professional innovators, those thought leaders, product designers, company founders, because my work accelerates the time from ideation to implementation and revenue. And at the same time, opening that creator to new levels of peace, of confidence, of satisfaction. So that's a long answer to your question, I think.
I love long answers. We will get into the details for sure, but before we get into ideation and creation, I'm curious to ask you about your psychotherapy experience. You used to be a psychotherapist about 20 years ago.
I did. It's actually even longer ago now than that, I could say. Yes, that was where I was first drawn in my life. I always knew that there was more to life than I could see in my family. and I knew there was more to me. And psychotherapy or psychology seemed to be the way to start getting familiar with that, opening those doors. And so I became a psychotherapist and did that for a number of years. It was in private practice. And even though I was, I could say, on the cutting edge of that work, my master's degree was in humanistic psychology. I did a lot of work in different growth centers. But there was still a part of me that wanted to know more and felt like there was still there was a next step. And so that is where that took me into my next step of working with energy and exploring that and leaving psychotherapy behind.
What did you learn from your psychotherapy experience?
A tremendous amount, really. First and foremost, I would say it was my opening into the emotional realm that had been blocked in me. And I learned about how to work with people and acknowledge people. And it even took me into, doing a lot of group work. I did a lot of study in working within groups. And I learned about how the first levels of how energy worked and how to work with energy to open people up to who they really were.
You mentioned about acknowledging your emotions and acknowledging others.
Mm-hmm.
This is the powerful thing that if we can acknowledge ourselves and acknowledge others, it creates a deeper connection. What could be some of the ways to acknowledge others and ourselves?
I can't believe you've just asked that question, Nishant, because literally just before I came on to be with you, I was writing about that. And I've written about it before, but it's like that was what I was needing to do some more writing about today. Because when we can really look at someone else and see their gifts, see what's special about them, see the light that's shining in them, even when they can't, that connects us in a way that few other things have the power to do. And it also gives people that way of seeing themselves that they may never have seen themselves before. So that the power of acknowledgement is powerful for ourselves as the one to acknowledge, but it's so amazing what doors it opens up within another.
Do you give us any template that we can just verbalize to other people?
Good question. Let me see. When I stop focusing so much on myself, like I'm the center of the universe, and we could say, well, of course I'm the center of the universe, but in so many ways, we're not the center of the universe. We're part of the universe. And in that way, we may be the center, but so are you. And so is the next person. And when we when we allow ourselves to shift our focus from, bragging about ourselves or focusing on what's wrong with ourselves and looking to see, well, who is this person that's here with me? Whether that's a teammate, a colleague, a family member, who is this person? Like, who are they really? And kind of softening around your own edges of who you think they are and what you think they're about. And being curious. I think curiosity is one of the best templates, because when you're curious about someone else, you start to see, what are the ways that I feel great when I'm around this person? What are the talents this person has, and how can I call that forward? And that's part of what makes a great leader, whether that's a team leader or a company leader or just, a leader within your own life.
Acknowledgement really matters. And I think in simple words, if we can simply say that to others, I acknowledge you for doing this work. I really acknowledge you for making an effort, along those lines.
Absolutely. And when you acknowledge in that way with no agenda, no expectation that they have to say it back to you or that you're trying to get something. Because if you do it when you're with an agenda, like you're trying to get something from the other person, it obviously is not real acknowledgement. Because acknowledgement is acceptance.
Could you give us an example, recent example, when you would have acknowledged somebody else?
Absolutely. Actually, on a call with a client earlier today, and it didn't matter that she was a client, but there was something that we were focused on around some challenges that she was having. And she's a brilliant woman, so powerful. But she was experiencing an aspect of herself as being challenging. And I was seeing how really that there were all these doors opening up and she wasn't seeing it. And so when I could point out and acknowledge how I was seeing her, it was like holding the vision for her of a bigger picture of herself than she could hold, than she was holding in that moment, I would say, because she actually does have the ability to hold it. But it shifted something because she felt my appreciation, but she felt her own love for herself, because it's like she softened around the edges then and received that acknowledgement from me.
We all struggle with this at times when we know the vision, but we can't see that vision clearly. We are not sure what is our next step. And if we don't have any coach or any support system, what can we do in that case, Laurie, to see that next step?
I speak a lot about the power of the breath, and that might sound kind of funny, but when I take a breath consciously, when I actively sit down and start to quiet myself a little bit and just take a simple breath in, that inhalation, and knowing that breath is what connects me in a way to everything that's out there, and that the breath even has its own intelligence. The breath knows exactly what to do in the body. You don't have to tell it what gases to mix with and what direction to go in. You simply can allow yourself to have that moment of where you really receive it. And receiving the breath is like receiving love. And receiving the breath is receiving acknowledgement. Oh, I'm alive and I'm okay. And it really is, this is something that I can do very simply for myself to settle myself and to go beyond the judgment, because that's really what can be in the way.
In the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned about esoteric technology you developed. Could you speak to that, please?
Actually, this is not something that I developed. It was something that I was really given the stewardship of by my teacher. And it's something called Turaya. That's Turaya, and the name of it, doesn't even matter. However, Turaya is something that is an energy, is a way of working with energy. It's can be done both as a hands-on way of working with someone or as a meditation form. But what it's about in the way I'm using that now is it's like the installation of an app within a body, within your body, so that you can raise your own frequency, your own vibration. And that vibration is what relates to that whole universal field that we know about, that we now know about, and that we are part of that universal field. If we put into our thoughts a lot of judgment, a lot of anger and disruption, we kind of separate ourselves, at least from a level of awareness of it, from that field, and we don't have access to receiving from that field of potentiality, which is really what it is. And so this is where often people feel really alone, like they've got to do whatever it is alone. It's all on me. I've got to do it myself. And I know that one. I know that feeling very well. When we start to connect and this is where I brought in the breath, when we start to connect with that feeling of, oh, there's all of this out there, and I'm a part of that. I'm, as my friend Jennifer Huff likes to say, I was God's great idea. And so why would we want to deny ourselves as this creation that we are? And we're here to create. We're here to be part of that act of creation. And so let us do that. And we can't do that if we're separate, if we're feeling separate.
How do you implement or practice Turaya in your personal life?
Boy, in every way. Turaya has given me the means to connect in with my own inner guidance system. And so in the work I do now, it is about teaching people how to do that, opening them up so that not so that I give them the answers, but so that they can discover their own answers. I mean, moment to moment kinds of answers. Which direction do I need to go in? What do I need to do? What do I need to do now? What's my next step? Is this person good for me in my life or not? All the questions that we have, all the things that we wish to create. For me, without this access to this what I call an esoteric technology, to the Turaya energies, I wouldn't have a way of making great decisions. I would make them with my head, and I've got a very smart head. And if I want to extend beyond that, to be able to touch into that field of potentiality, to that field of universal intelligence, that's where the Turaya comes in. And so meditation is really important to me. It's something that I do every day. It's something that I teach regularly too. And it's not so much the teaching of it, but for me, it's the way that I work with the energy during the time of meditation, or if I'm initiating someone, or if I'm doing hands-on work with someone, that opens them up to their own inner guidance system.
What does meditation look like in this Turaya umbrella?
It looks the very same that you might see with somebody else. It's not guided meditation. It is silent meditation. So no one's going to see something different. However, I have been teaching it online. I've been doing this for several decades already, but I've been teaching this live online twice a week so that people can have this experience regularly and start to develop those pathways within themselves. And how it looks is, everybody coming together on Zoom, everybody in their own little square. I do a little talk, whatever is needing to be addressed that day, and then people go inside, and I'm working with each person individually, energetically, as that's happening. No one is seeing something different, and yet the power of being able to go more deeply, more quickly is really evident. And the kinds of experiences that people report, because we do have time then for people to share those experiences, which usually doesn't happen in meditation. Like if you're going to an ashram, people have their own experiences, and you never get to hear what other people have experienced.
Is there any difference between other silent meditation and Turaya silent meditation?
The biggest difference is the way that I work with the energy during the time of, because it's not you're not focusing on a mantra, or I may give people the direction to perhaps focus on their breath to begin with. But the biggest difference, and it's a huge difference, is the way that the meditation teacher is working with the energies, with higher consciousness energy symbols during the time of the meditation.
What time of the day do you practice this in your life?
For myself?
Yes.
Anytime. I mean, I may start out my day with that in general. However, because this is something that I've been doing a very long time, and the people that do work with this over time, you could be sitting in the board meeting and take a breath, a conscious breath, and you can tap right into that energy. So that's what gets developed over time, is that ability to connect so deeply with your own inner compass, as I call it, that it doesn't matter where you are and what's going on. You take a breath and you're connected.
Out of my curiosity, I want to ask you that if I am practicing Turaya silent meditation, then how do I connect to this energetic field that you're talking about, or universal intelligence? If that question makes sense.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, I'm not going to talk about it in terms of Turaya meditation, because they're not doing that. You know what I mean? If we're just talking to your listening audience and someone wants to know about connecting in with that, because they can. It's not like this is the only way to connect in with that by any means. But it takes practice, and it takes focus, and the ability to allow yourself to get so quiet inside. And that's the piece that sometimes people have a more difficult time with. But the importance of that of going into what I call the great central silence is what allows people to start connecting in with that field of universal intelligence. And then it's, okay, I connect with that, and I might start having these energy experiences. But two pieces are really important to that. One is learning discernment, because there's all kinds of energy. And just because you feel energy doesn't mean it's of that highest vibration that we may say we all want. The other is, after we have an experience of energy, we need to decode it. We need to learn how to decode what has happened for us, how to integrate that into our life, how to, I could say, make sense of it, but how to use that for creation, how to use that for whatever project you're working on. And that's part of what I teach people in what I call the potentiation process. And that's the process that I've developed, bringing together this Turaya work, even my psychotherapy work, my inner compass system that I've developed, and all of the research that has been out there and that I have done around this higher intelligence, around this universal field of intelligence.
Could you elaborate on this potentiation process?
There's not much more that I think I could say around it now. Well, there's probably is. I always think that perhaps to start with, but there's always more. This is what the system that I have developed to work with innovators. And innovators, I mean that there's lots of people that are innovators that would never use that word about themselves. But they are the thought leaders, the company founders, the creatives perhaps, but the people that have a great idea and don't know what to do with it, don't know how to be with it.
That is so common.
It is. And it's also for the teams that are actually working on something, on a project. They may be designing a new product. They may be a team that is tasked with coming up with the next product line or a new way of marketing or. But the potentiation process teaches people how to connect to that inner compass, because when you're connected with the inner compass, what you're doing is you're not just being creative willy-nilly. You're not just using your intellect. All those things are part of it. You're also tapping into that field of the unknown. And you're learning how to do it. And this is a process that teaches people how to do that and how to get comfortable with it. Because when you've got that, and I love doing that with teams, because when teams can come together, even virtually right now, around a particular project, having learned how to do this, the sky is the limit. That's where quantum leaps happen. So you're refining what some people call intuition, other people call gut instinct. Well, I was really successful because I followed my gut instinct. But what could you do if you really could refine that If you refined that gut instinct, and well, you'd probably be able to create much more quickly with much more ease, so that you're not in struggle. It's like, what if you could communicate the picture of what your vision is to your team and get that ongoing support and follow through?
That is not easy to listen to our inner compass, inner voice, intuition. Could you give us an example from your life when you struggled to listen to your inner compass?
Oh my goodness. How much time do we have?
We have a lot of time.
Oh, wow. It's like, what dimension do I bring this from? Really, it's something that happens all the time. I get an idea about doing something, or I get something that I want to do, and I'm thinking about a project that I wanted to create for my business, in my business. And so this was me with me. This wasn't about me working with a team. This was just me with me. And my old way would have been to, kind of map it all out and see what the pieces were and get that all in place and start doing it. But this is something that I've been doing now, for a long time. But I will speak to this particular example where, because I thought it was such a great idea, I thought I had it all. And what I found as I started taking steps to implement it was not working. As a matter of fact, I could go so far as to say it was failing. And that doesn't feel very good. And there was money involved, and other players that came into things, even though they weren't officially on my team. And so I had to pull way back and go inside and start asking the questions. And this is one of the things that I teach about asking the questions within myself in that deeper state, so that I could get the information from that field of creative intelligence and see exactly where I needed to shift that, how I needed to speak about it in a different way, and really how I needed to recreate it entirely. And I had to be willing to do that.
What questions did you ask at the time?
Oh, I don't remember specifically, but the kinds of questions that I will often ask, or I will suggest to others to ask, are things like, well, actually, let me give you an example of what I will teach people to do. When they start to be able to do this, I think it's a great question to ask in the morning. What is this day about? Because you may have your whole plan for the day, and the energies have a different plan. If you really want to co-create, and that's the essence of co-creation for me, is it's not me with myself, it's me with the universe. So I want to get some sensing from the universe. What is this day about? What's been seeded, and what's possible that I don't even yet know about? And so often I will get information that takes me in a completely different direction than where I was going to begin with, than what my to-do list. Another question might be, I might look at my to-do list, and instead of going down it, one by one by one, I will ask about, what do I need to do first? Because often what shows up for me is, it might be the sixth thing down on my list that I need to do. And it might be something that I think is totally innocuous. But then doing it has so often shifted other things on my list so that they get taken off my list because they're not even important. They're not even part of it. Another example of that is, how this is something that happens for people all the time. Someone comes into your mind that you haven't thought of for a long time. I will ask, what is this about? Am I to reach out? Am I to connect with this person? Do I need to contact them? So I don't just automatically do that, but I will get the information that I need in order to act on that most fully. And that might be the person that without me knowing it had the answers to what I was needing to work on that day and what I was needing to create that day.
Do you journal on these questions, or how do you find answers to these
Well,
questions?
I can't really go into a lot of detail about that. This is things that I teach in my potentiation process course. It is not journaling. It is actually going into that deeper state that we were talking about earlier, into that
Mm-hmm.
quiet inside state, so that I can actually allow something to come to me, to come through, as opposed to journaling, which is often what a client this morning described it as a brain dump. It's not that kind of idea, and nor is it an emotional kind of clearing, both of which are important and useful. This is about something different altogether.
And where can our listeners learn about your potential process?
The best place to find out about my work is on my website, which is the BACA, BACA Institute.com. And there are all sorts of goodies on my website. I've got a lot to read, a lot of blogs that will give you a lot of information about all the kinds of things that we're talking about. There's information about the potentiation process, about Turaya, about a Turaya meditation intensive that's coming up next month, which is Inspiration into Action. And there's a really fun creative innovator style quiz that's on my website that people can take and get more information about what is their personal style. In other words, how do they best work with their own process of creating something. And I don't mean being an artist. I mean creating an idea, using their own innate intelligence.
What is creative innovator style?
Well, everybody's got their own way of doing things. So I feel like people have their own style. And this quiz will show you what your own personal style is and where the holes might be and where the strengths are. And so that way you get to know more fully the ways in which you can work with that. Because sometimes, well, and I find this actually often, that people try and create in ways that fight their natural inclinations. And that can be what's standing in the way of people turning their great ideas into reality. And just simply having a great idea or 1,000 great ideas, it's frustrating until you can start working with it and taking it into realization.
Could you give us a bigger picture of these style forms? What are different forms of styles?
Well, I'd actually prefer that people go and take the quiz rather than giving anything away. I will give you an example of something, though. Think about this. Think about the ways that sometimes people will get flooded with ideas and that's their natural way of being. And how can I say this? They're what I call the creative dreamer. And what they need, having those great ideas is wonderful. But if we are, and creative dreamers often are, very connected with that field of universal intelligence, so they're constantly getting ideas. What they don't have necessarily is discernment. So they may be getting all these ideas because they're connected in that way, but they don't know which ones are for them. They don't know which is the one that their unique matrix needs to connect with and flesh out and bring to life. It's like I have aspects of the creative dreamer in me. And so when I'm working with someone, I may have, what will come to me is a lot of ideas that aren't for me at all. They're for them because I'm tuning into the field in relationship to them. And so this is all about, what do you need to know how can you use that? Because it's a strength. It's part of my own superpower. It's one of them, your own superpower of innovation. But if you just stay in that state of being flooded with ideas, you're never going to be able to create anything. And that can be very frustrating.
It can be so frustrating.
Do you know that one? Is that familiar to you?
It does. And I want to ask you that, do we have to take this quiz one time or do we have to take it often?
Oh, no, you take it once. Take it once. Now, people will say, well, I could have answered these questions differently. But taking it once, and then there's you get your results, and then there's another level. If you want to sign up, and be on the mailing list, you'll get even more about that style. But it's a way of giving yourself permission to be who you are, and then to use that in the service of what it is you're wanting to create. It also will show you some of the things that you might need to work on. For example, with the creative dreamer, as I was talking about discernment, without discernment, we don't know what's true or not. And so we can open to that whole field, and we don't know which way we need to go, which thing is ours. And that's very important, to be able to have that discernment. That way we can follow our inner compass. We can learn how to follow our inner compass with much more precision.
Then how does self-worth, the realization of our self-worth, plays a big role in moving from ideation to creation?
Oh boy, that's a great question. Without self-worth, without that feeling of I have worth just because I'm alive, we doubt ourselves. And for me, this is something that was very true for me, is I had a lot of self-doubt. I mean, not only just growing up, but, in my first parts of my careers, I had a lot of self-doubt because I didn't trust myself. And I think more directly, I didn't trust that there was that bigger picture, that there was this energetic source and support. So that's why I did so much with my head, because that's what was celebrated. I got good grades. I did well in school. That was what my family celebrated. But it wasn't what nourished me and fed my soul. It kept me in a certain kind of box. And so having or trying to develop beyond that, starting to open to those other aspects of myself, I found myself feeling my own self-worth, or feeling, even more importantly, my own self-love. And without that, it's really difficult to create. We get stuck. It's like an old habit that keeps you from moving forward.
Laurie, at what point in your life you realized that the lack of self-worth is not serving you in your life?
Well, I always knew it. But where things shifted was actually in an experience with a particular teacher, and it was an energy experience. And it was an experience where I felt, or what opened for me was that feeling of self-love. And it was only in opening to it that I realized how I hadn't had it. You don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you don't have until something opens and you say, oh my goodness. And then that became the far bigger reality than the doubt. And truly the doubt just seemed to leave. And it's not like it left forever or for good. Well, it's pretty much left for good now. Because even if it creeps back in, it's like an old inkling of something. I can take a breath and know that that doesn't have any truth. That's where discernment comes in. One place where discernment comes in.
As we are talking about the realization of self-worth, I'm curious to ask you, what was your childhood like?
Mm. My father died when I was really, really young, just before I was 7. And he was the one that I knew love through. In other words, he held that in my family. And when he died, my mother was left with 4 kids, no money, and had to figure out a way to survive. So what I learned from my mother was struggle, that life was struggle. And so that colored everything. And that's why, I always knew there was still some part of me that knew that there was more to life, but it wasn't represented in what I could see around me. It wasn't shown to me.
Do you discuss about the energy work with your siblings?
Not really. No. I did with my mom later on. Before, actually, it was really before she passed, before all of this was, before I'd started getting into this, but right at the beginning, I would say. But I did share with her and introduced her to some things. And I remember sitting with her somewhere in a very relaxed state and her just looking at me and there was such a feeling of appreciation in her eyes that I had never seen. So
That
my
is
brothers
beautiful.
I know about it, but nobody. I don't have to talk about it at all with them. I just have to be it.
Being, not just
Mm-hmm.
talking about it. I love this.
Yeah.
If I'm going to ask you something, you may pass it if you're not feeling comfortable about it.
Okay.
So, if at this point in your life you have done so much work in this line, and is there anything that you would like to talk or speak to your mom that you have never told to her?
I don't think so because I've really done it. Because that this would not be the first invitation, and no, I don't think there's anything that I have not said to her. I've gone through the psychological and really what I got to do with her in the last part of her life and frankly in the 3 days following her death was to connect with her at such a profoundly deep level and to be able to share heart to heart what was meaningful and what was needed.
That is so deep. I'm loving this conversation.
Oh, thank you, Nishant. Your questions are provocative, certainly.
When I reached out to you some time ago and I asked you, what else would you like to discuss in this recording? You talked about unconditional love as well. We human beings struggle with self love,
Mm-hmm.
and attachment with that love. Could you suggest us some practices to connect to that self love and how to embrace the power of unconditional love?
First and foremost, it's to know that it exists, it's real. What I call the inner teacher, the inner self is real. It's not just a metaphor. And that we are not alone. That there is that love from the universe, if you want to say it that way, from God, from presence, however it is that you feel moved to entertain that. When we allow ourselves to get that quiet, and that's why getting quiet to me is so fundamentally important, we start to feel how we are part of this, capital H, capital T, capital H, capital I, capital S. We are part of this. We're not separate. It's when we make ourselves separate that we forget who we really are. And we forget that love is just there and is available and part of us. And so if I'm feeling that kind of separation, I go to my breath. I go to my breath and I just start to remember that there's something more than this moment where I'm feeling separate.
And what do you do when you wake up? Or let me ask you in a different way. What does your first 60 to 90 minutes of morning look like?
Hmm. If I can, depending on my schedule, I really prefer waking up before an alarm or before I have to get out of bed to do something. Because the first part of my morning for me is being grateful, first of all, that I'm alive. And then, it's feeling into what's happened during the night and who am I today? That really is the question. It's not assuming that who I am today is the same as who I was yesterday. And so I really want to feel what's going on within me right now. Who am I? How am I? And I start to ask some of those questions that we talked about earlier of, what is this day about for me? What's new? What am I needing to pay attention to today? And that first part of the morning is very much around those kinds of questions. And then often moving into time for meditation. It might be there, it might be later. There's those 2 days of the week where I'm doing that online with others. So it day to day might vary somewhat from that.
How many minutes do you spend in meditation on an average?
I mean, sometimes it might be 45 minutes, sometimes it might be 5. Depending upon what's needed and what's happening in the day and what my schedule is. But it's so important for me to have that. And it doesn't mean if I didn't get it first thing that I'm not going to, there may be in the middle of the day where it's like, oh, okay, I can feel I'm off kilter. What do I need to do? Oh, what I need to do is I need to get quiet. And it doesn't take me long to get back into that place where the flow is. And that's when I know it's like, oh, okay, that's where I need to be, is where I feel the flow.
And now I'm going to read one quote from Rumi Jalaluddin that I copied from your profile. Respond to the call that excites your spirit. Do you have any other favorite quote that you live your life by, or anything that excites you the most?
I have so many, and I'm just thinking of one, and I'm not going to do it verbatim very well, but it's from Gotha, and it's about, whatever you can dream that you can do it, because that when the doing of it, the taking action is what has the genius in it.
And adding to that, what are you most excited about creating new things this year or next year? This year is already gone. So.
Well, it isn't, but I'm seeing how, and this is not new, but I'm getting some new ideas about what I want to do with it. I'm seeing how important this is for our next leaders, for the children. And I really want to create ways to train more teachers to bring this kind of vision into being with the children. Because if we can keep the kids alive in their connection, not to shut that down, then this is where the solutions to our pressing problems are. And we have a lot of them, a lot of pressing problems. And if we can open up the teachers to keep those kids open, we'll be okay.
And before I ask you my last question,
okay,
what is the impact you want to leave on this world?
It's that. It's for people to recognize that they are loved and that they are love, and that presence is alive and well within them, no matter what.
Last but not the least, do you have any closing thought, any recommendation, anything that you want to share to our listeners?
Don't forget to celebrate. Remember to celebrate. Celebrate life, celebrate who you are, celebrate, your family and your friends. Find ways and places to celebrate, because celebration is part of what opens us up to that bigger picture. And celebrations can sometimes get forgotten, especially in these days where things feel like they're more of a struggle.
I'm definitely going to celebrate our conversation.
I'm celebrating you and I right now. I'm celebrating that I've had this opportunity to be with you, and that you've invited me to be here, and that this is the start of a whole new relationship.
Thank you so much, Laurie. It was wonderful talking to you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Nishant. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode today. If you did enjoy this, please subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast, or you can visit https://nishantgarg.me, NISHANTGARG.me. You can also share this episode with your loved ones to help them live a fulfilled life. You are not alone in this journey. We all struggle in life. There is no shame in talking about it. I go through my highs and lows. I get depressed, and these practices help me in living a resilient life. You can also do this. You got this. Don't judge yourself. You are doing the best you can. And thank you so much again.